the Jenkins Platform SIG meeting. We're April the 22nd of 2025. Today around the table we have Kenneth Salerno, Giovanni Vaccarino, Mark Waite, Kevin Martins, and myself, Bruno Verhastel. I don't know if we will be able to go through the whole agenda, but for today I had something about the switch of the default containers to Java 21. We'll talk about the end of support for Java 11, but not really. More about what's next. Then we'll talk about Oracle Patch Day. Where are we now? Java 25 container image updates. If we still have time for the Jenkins agents and containers, and maybe the work in progress on images. Is there anything else you would like to add to the agenda, folks?
Well, so will we, with Kenneth here in particular, I want to have a conversation about PPC 64LE and S390X in the context of Java updates. So the Java update is on the agenda already. Is that okay if we have that conversation there?
Of course, I wanted to talk about that when it comes to Java 17 and 21, because
Perfect.
that's what we are dealing with these days. So if that fits,
yeah,
let's
that's
do
great.
it like that.
So if we can do it, just so long as we discuss.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mark. So let's start with the proposal. I think it was yours, Mark, to switch default containers, the latest tags, to use Java 21. So you proposed something already for the controller image, so that we will use directly the Java 21 in the containers instead of JDK 17. Why? There are several reasons for that. The first one being a big label. How do you call that, Mark, by the way? The maintenance something?
Administrative monitor.
I always
admin monitor.
Admin monitor, of course. So it's displaying something that, oh, maybe I should switch. And if you're using the latest image, maybe that's not something you would like to be displayed on your latest container. So that's why, Mark, you proposed to do something with all these tags in order to use JDK 21 instead of JDK 17. So far, so good. I think we are still waiting for Hervé's review before we merge anything, right?
Yeah, we need. I'd like at least one more review. I think if we don't get one more review, it doesn't necessarily have to be Hervé, but I would like at least one more review.
Okay.
I've done all the testing I could think of to do. I ran out of ideas of ways to test it, and it is just changing when we tag Jenkins /Jenkins:/latest, the image we're tagging uses Java 21 instead of Java 17. But there are all sorts of other places that are all listed in the pull request. Yeah. So I'd just like another review before it's merged.
Yeah, and we were pretty confident with the Linux part, but not so much with the Windows part, right?
Absolutely, completely non-confident with the Windows part. Yes, the tests all pass, but I'm not a Windows Docker container user and probably never will.
Yeah, you don't deserve to be a Windows container user. You did nothing wrong. So we still have to work around this for the SSH agent image and for the basic agent image too. Yes, we're already talking about Java 21, and later on we'll talk about Java 25, but we still have to deal somehow with Java 11. So of course, the controller has abandoned the use of Java 11 a long time ago, but we still have quite a lot of plugins using Java 11 and even some plugins using older version of Java. That's why we have some kind of an unofficial campaign targeting these plugins in order to get them to adopt modern Java versions. That's why we have a Jenkins PR tracker, and we're doing that with a tool called the Plugin Modernizer. That's a tool that came from a GSOC project from last year, created by Valentin Delay. And yeah, that's why we are tracking the PR that are automatically created and see if we are getting them to get merged or if plugins won't get updated, and that may happen. I don't know if we'll talk about the Plugin Maintainers Initiative, Mark, but of course, one day we'll have to make a choice. I was dreaming of bringing everyone together and putting the majority of our plugins to recent version of Java, but maybe that's just not possible because maintainers are long gone. They're doing something else. The plugins are not relevant for some of them. So maybe one day we'll have to make a hard decision, which is cut, maybe just not allow plugins to be still in the update center if they are using a very old version of Java. And maybe some of the maintainers will come out of the shadow and do something, or maybe we'll just have to accept that it's over. We'll see. Mark, would you have any comment or question on that?
No, I think you're right.
Thank you. So 2 weeks ago, Mark, when you led the Platform SIG meeting, you talked about the Oracle patch day because it happened on this day. So we have new Java versions for the 11, 17,
Yes. So I was
and
wrong.
21.
It's actually only a week old. I've updated the text. It's okay that I was wrong, but I was wrong. Oracle patch day was just last week. So last Wednesday, I think it was, that we got their delivery from Oracle, and when Eclipse Temurin started delivering. So we're less than 7 days since the.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're doing.
Okay.
They're doing, actually, Eclipse is doing quite well at getting things rolled out. Very, very well.
Except for some platforms. But yeah, I was kind of worried because we were not having anything for Alpine 4 days ago, but I think this is solved now. We're still missing 2 platforms now, the S319X and the PPC64LE I catched earlier today.
Well, and we've actually got S390X for Java 21. So they are making progress on the less heavily used platforms, but we're gonna have to watch and see. We hope that they'll make fast progress.
We'll see, because for some platforms, after some time, it's more and more difficult to get the test passed. I think it's called the ACK or something. And that's what happened with the ARM32 platform. I know it's a cursed platform, but that's why we don't have JDK 21 for the ARM32 platform. I mean, it may happen for other platforms in the future. We'll see. I don't know. Mark, did you create a subject to address the PPC64 and S390X later on in the agenda, or should we talk about that now?
I didn't. This is probably a good time to discuss it.
Let's do it then.
So Kenneth, one of my thoughts was, if we get an S390X JDK for Java 17.0.15, and we get a PPC64 LE for Java 17.0.15 within, say, the next 1 to 2 weeks, we just continue as we are. My worry was, if it takes more than another 2 weeks, let's say, we may have to then say, shall we separate our Java version dependency and allow ourselves to do 17.0.15 on everything except those where Temurin hasn't finished it yet. The idea, that's kind of a hassle, but it's that caliber thing. By the 30th of April release of the LTS release of 2.504.1, I'd really like us to be on 17.0.15 and 21.0.7 for the mainstream platforms, ARM64 and AMD64. So now, Kenneth, this is where I want to hear your weigh in on what you think.
So I would ask, what was the past experience? How much was the delay? Do you think 2 weeks?
Yeah. I was about to ask the same question. A pattern.
Yeah, so varies. It could be, I think the most we ever saw was 10 days. But I've probably got one significant figure in saying the number 10. So it's 10 or 15. I don't remember which. And I don't have the easy research to prove it. They've been reasonably effective at doing it. We never had to consider this in the past, and I'd really like to not consider it this time either. So I don't have any evidence that says we're going to need to do this, but given that the next time the Platform SIG meets will be 2 weeks from now, and we've got an LTS release 8 days from now, I'm worried, okay, if they don't get it by the end of this week, do we need to consider going to doing a split on the container images so that we could do 17014 for PPC 64 LE and S390X and do 17015 for everybody else.
It would be easy enough. I think we just keep it in our back pocket and wait.
Okay, good.
But fair enough. I don't want to hold out the other architectures, I think.
Right, and that's good. So you're okay with the idea. It's not that we would drop support of the other of an architecture. That's not the proposal, right?
Yeah, we're just sort of branching off from which Java version we're downloading, and I think it's not something we should do today, but maybe in a week we consider doing it if they still haven't released it.
Great. Okay, good. Bruno, does that sound sensible to you?
Yes. Yes, indeed. Yeah, totally. Sorry.
Yeah. So we've got a decision point at end of, I'd call our decision point at the end of this week, because doing changes to Docker builds, I want to get them tested in the weekly, which will happen next Tuesday before we use them in the LTS on Wednesday. So I think our decision point is end of this week. We watch it and see.
Cool, thank you. This time we have a CVE which has not been proved but does exist in the older version of the JDK 17. So we should migrate in a way or another as soon as possible. Nobody has proven that it's exploitable, but it does exist.
And I don't expect anyone will be able to prove that it's exploitable, because the description in the Java published CVE says this is very hard to get. This is very difficult to execute. So it's not a high common, and they gave it a reasonably low score because it's so difficult to get to. Now there's no, they don't give enough details for the rest of us to, at least not for me, to decide, can I duplicate it inside Jenkins? We have no evidence from anybody that it can be used to do any harm to Jenkins.
Cool. Thanks a lot for your insights, folks. If we're done with that, let's switch to Java 25.
Yep.
So Temurin supplies JDK 25 early access binaries. It's been quite a while now. Of course, it's not an urgent subject, so that's why we haven't addressed it yet. I mean, not we, the infra team, because they are well busy with other things. But nonetheless, the plugin maintainers initiative will maybe try to address the 250 most used plugins by the end of the year, trying to get them to use or to be built, with Java 25. So in order to do so, we have to install Java 25 on the infra. So the binaries are available. The update CLI native Temurin source is also available. We checked that. So we know that whenever we'll use Temurin early access version, we will be able to update it to the next one whenever it appears. We have seen also that the shell files that we use outside of update CLI still work with early access. In the past we had lots of trouble with the plus sign, hyphens, underscores. Well, it's kind of difficult to deal with version names for Temurin. Fortunately, since we migrated to the use of the API, things get way more smooth. So we should be good to go. Anyhow, we now have created a help desk issue so that we'll be able to track these down. So in the coming weeks or month, we'll try to install the JDK 25 early access versions just about anywhere it's needed. So on ci.jenkins.io to begin with. So of course, the plugin maintainers could start to play with that whenever it's available. And maybe the Jenkins core developers, if they want to play with the latest language settings or whatever, which are brought by Java 24. I don't know about Java 25, but for sure, there are some new things in the language for Java 24. I don't think it's a good idea to bring that early on, but just to play, why not? Mark or others, would you have any input on that?
No, I think I've got to install the early access version. I am curious, do you have a preference towards using the Temurin early access version rather than the OpenJDK version?
Or I'm totally biased. I only use Temurin just about everywhere because whatever the platform may be, I find a Temurin binary somewhere, even for RISC-V. That's why I even don't try or think to use OpenJDK. But whatever, I don't care. Do you think we would need to use something else than the Temurin?
I don't know. I was just thinking that OpenJDK does the builds. I've got I'm going to click through your link there and double check to see are Temurin's builds current compared to. Yeah, so Temurin builds are much older than the OpenJDK builds.
Oh,
OpenJDK is on build 19 now, whereas the Temurin build is only on build 8 or 9. So I think Temurin or the OpenJDK may actually be rebuilding as often as weekly. So we may want to use OpenJDK rather than Temurin for early access.
cool.
And not that I mean, Temurin is fine, right? It's still an early access Temurin build is still better than no build. An outdated early access Temurin build is still better than no build.
Okay. Then we'll see. Maybe I should do something and add the message in the issue. We'll see. Thank you, Mark. Would anyone have a question or comment on this subject?
Oh, I guess one more is the early access builds are only for AMD 64 Linux, ARM 64 Linux, Mac OS, ARM 64, Mac OS, I think not even Mac OS. Oh, Mac OS x64 and Windows x64. So none of the less typical platforms are supported by OpenJDK. So that would probably why we might want Temurin if we need to do something on another platform.
Yeah, because they supply RISC-V nobody cares about and other platforms. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Mark. Now, as for the container image updates for the Jenkins controller, so the 2.492.3 was released 3 weeks ago. I haven't heard anything really terrible about this one, so this should work. And the release candidate, which has no Docker container, by the way, has been released 4 days ago, then 2 days ago. I don't know what happened, but I've seen several RCs available. Maybe, yeah, I just clicked on that earlier today and was surprised to see that we have several RC. I even can't type correctly. Yeah, so we have 3 of them. I don't know why. I guess it's typical, Mark. You're muted. Sorry.
Because we use incrementals, every time we build, we get a one. But if you look at the Jenkins GitHub page, so github.com/JenkinsCI/Jenkins, so Jenkins core, in the releases page, you should see a link there. Yeah, 2.504.1 RC. Scroll down a little bit. And that has a link to Artifactory.
Okay.
So that Artifactory link will take you to the
right one.
Right. And any later one is fine as well, but that is a good choice.
Okay, so it's from the 14th of April. Okay, got it.
Okay.
So the first one.
Right.
Cool. Thank you, Mark.
And I've been running it in my container images since the day it was delivered or the day after. So I've not seen any problems with it yet.
That's pretty cool. Thank you. Now for the weeklies. So we had 2 weeklies since 2 weeks ago, and I haven't seen anything except the move to the latest Jenkins weekly, of course, and the bump of the Debian bookworm version. That's all. For the Jenkins agent, I've seen 2 new releases for this one, and only bump of the OpenSSH and the Debian bookworm line. It's also no new features, no bug fix, no nothing. And no new release for the Docker agent. As for the work in progress on images, I've seen something on the controller, which is yours, I think, Mark. Yeah, indeed. So you want to use the JDK 21 instead of JDK 17. We talked about that at the very beginning of this meeting. As for the Docker agent, I've only seen the add a Windows test on long path with Git. That's a long story, always with the path in Windows. Anyway, so there is this test PR, I would say, that tries to prove that we are on the right way. And there is a add Java 25 preview target for all images. It's been a long-running PR, and I have some corrections to do, some modifications, because the project has been refactored between the time I started the PR and now. So I have to redo just about everything, but that's okay. We are progressing slowly, but we'll get there eventually. And Kenneth, we still have your PR. The patch to support audit the login UID immutability. Last time we talked, I thought we were just about to merge it, but I was wrong. So as Damien said 2 weeks ago, we have not forgotten you, but it still has to be properly reviewed. Sorry about that.
So, and I found somebody who demonstrated I think it was with a security information and event management software company, a scene company, that demonstrated a vulnerability if your login UID file is not immutable, where the attacker could essentially cloak who they are. They could disappear from auditee by changing their user ID. So systems like mine, which I discovered through this issue, where login UID is immutable, are obviously not vulnerable to that attack. So this is I think people who introduce these type of system hardening are going to run into this issue. So I think it is important. We should eventually address it.
Yeah, I would love to.
Should I attach a link to that demonstration, you think, for Damien to look?
Yes, please.
Okay, I could do that.
So you can put it in the chat or directly in the document, as you please. Okay, I think we made it to the end of the agenda. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about today? Take that for a no. Thanks a lot for your time, folks. It was a joy to have all of you in this meeting. Sometimes it's just Mark and I, so it's pretty cool to see all these people. The recording should be available for 24 to 48 hours, and we should see each other 2 weeks from now. Until then, enjoy using Jenkins. Bye-bye.
Bye.